Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer.
Thanks again, Dr. Alan Singer, educator, historian, for joining us on this Media Watch edition. And yes, all that historical knowledge and expertise will come in quite handy.
I hope so.
Bottom line is, we need to put this whole Trump indictment on federal charges in perspective, because these people seem to have lost their minds in the Republican Party about the quote weaponization of the Justice Department, blah, 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 blah. But we can discuss that in much more detail clinically as we proceed. But Bob, what have you got for us on the latest on this federal indictment? As we dig into the latest before we put the entire thing into perspective. The judge has said she wants to help expedite as the special prosecutor would like, and she named August. What did she say?
Yeah, the judge in this case has caught people basically by surprise in the speed with which she seems to want to start this case. I'm trying to pull up the time story that I was quoting. Here we go. She wants to start this case on August 14th. At least that's the date that she's set. But everyone basically knows that this is way too aggressive a date. There are going to be motions after motions after motions, and there'll be all sorts of delay. But in this case, it seems to be an attempt by the judge, who's a 2020 Trump appointee, to basically establish that she's in charge. She's not going to be replaced, and she's going to be hands-on with this. That seems to be the statement being made by Judge Eileen M. Cannon. She had set. I just want to pick out one item pointed out by the Time story. I'll just quote one paragraph. The early moves by Judge Cannon, a relatively inexperienced jurist who was appointed by Mr. Trump in 2020, are being particularly closely watched. She disrupted the documents investigation last year with several rulings favorable to the former president before a conservative appeals court overturned her, saying that she never had legitimate legal authority to intervene. So that's where we're coming from at the moment. And she's set the trial to be in Fort Pierce, Florida, at St. Lucie County, I believe. So we'll see if that means anything, the location of the venue, as we get closer.
Yeah, Fort Pierce is not the highest profile location. This is a Miami federal jurisdiction. Normally, Mar-a-Lago is probably closer to Miami than Fort Pierce, right?
Yes.
And the documents were squirreled away or not squirreled away in Mar-a-Lago. So I see your point about why did she pick Fort Pierce. But Alan, you got a take on what you think she's trying to do with this.
Look, I tend to be more cynical than the New York Times. And I'm looking at this, I'm saying people have questioned her being competence in managing this case. And I'm looking at this, and we know that the Trump people are going to be putting through for postponements because they're going to need time. They're going to have to go through those boxes. So they're going to need time. I think this was a move that she made to be able to justify she remain as the judge. I mean, that's my take on this.
Yeah, I think both you guys are right. I think she's still secretly a Trump admirer since he put her on the bench. She's making whatever move she can to make sure she stays on that particular case, and subtly, but not so subtly, make sure things are leaning in his favor. That's my take, not just as a cynical citizen, but as a journalist who tends to look at certain moves by the judiciary and people in government with a jaundiced eye, as we used to call it, Bob. Yeah, you remember the old police blotter reporting? Oh yeah, this just came off the police blotter. Suspect shot and killed because he was resisting arrest. Oh, okay, that's what we report. Oh, a week later, oh, there was some cell phone video that kind of shows a different story. Well, that's why I tend to look at anything coming from official sources with a jaundiced eye. And that's
Well,
just,
we know what change. Well, this isn't a change of venue, but we know what venue can do. We know what venue did in the Rodney King case, moving that to Simi Valley instead of having it in L.A.
yeah,
We know exactly what picking the wrong judge does, as we did in Kenosha with the Rittenhouse. Had a judge who was all in his favor. So yeah, we tend to be cynical about these things.
yes, we do. But to get to the heart of the matter, now, no sooner did this indictment come down than the Republican establishment, from Kevin McCarthy on down, went totally bonkers. And instead of looking at the very well-researched, very well-itemized indictment, one of those, quote, speaking indictment that tells a story about what the charges are, their initial across-the-board reaction was a weaponization of the Justice Department, a two-tiered criminal justice system. Okay, two-tiered criminal justice system as a Black male in this country, I can say, yeah, we've always had a two-tiered criminal justice system in this country, but it's always been in favor of rich white guys, which Donald Trump is. And so, yeah, as a two-tiered criminal justice system, he's been the beneficiary of that all his goddamn life. Never been brought up on any stiff people, didn't pay bills, did all kinds of illegal stuff, and walked away scot-free. So for the GOP rank and file and the MAGA crowd and the elected officials to call this a weaponization of the criminal justice system in the DOJ, I find laughable and ludicrous.
Now, both of you read at least you scanned over the charges and the indictment, and it is encyclopedic. I mean, it's so complete and it's so encompassing and it's so specific. You wonder, well, we know they read it, but they act like they didn't read it. And there you go. You have the concept of the weaponization of the Justice Department, which is obviously not the case here.
You know, you may be giving the Republican Party too much credit when you say that their leadership has read the indictment. I don't even know if they watch Fox News, but I don't know if they've read the newspaper reports. I mean, I think Trump has been doing more damage to his case than really anybody else can at this point. You know, his original argument was that he had every right to remove these documents under the Presidential Records Act because he was president. Yeah. And then he changed his mind and he says, well, I had a right to take them because they were my personal property. And then he did an interview on TV, which bordered on the absurd, where he said, well, I couldn't turn them over because I hadn't gone through to remove my golf shirts and golf shoes from the document boxes. I mean, every time he speaks, it's more ridiculous than the time.
When Brit Hume of Fox News calls out Donald Trump for being ridiculous and incoherent about his explanation for keeping the document, you know he has really fallen into, total incoherence. But people at Fox News don't call him out for being stupid and incoherent very often. But aside from the humor of this, let's get down to the seriousness of this thing. I want to dig into historically what these Republicans are actually, in a long line of stuff. Go back historically to when a head of state in this country, before we go into heads of state across the globe, gets charged with committing crimes. Talk to us, Alan, historically about past stuff when people got charged and got tried or didn't get tried back in the day.
Well, the Republicans keep arguing that this is an unprecedented step. And the reality is it's not unprecedented. There are cases in the past, not exactly the same, but there are definite cases in the past. The one that stands out the most is, and just by a lot of the news people have also been calling it unprecedented. So it's Associated Press, PBS, Washington Post. So it's not just the Republicans. But after he resigned the presidency, this is in 1974, Richard Nixon faced criminal charges until his self-chosen successor, Gerald Ford, granted him a total and unconditional pardon. Now, in the National Archives, there is the draft of charges that were being prepared by federal prosecutors to present to a grand jury. And they accused Nixon of, quote, unlawfully, willfully, and knowingly conspiring to commit offenses against the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So Nixon's criminal acts included bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and obstruction of a criminal investigation. So there is a precedent for a move to indict a former president. The difference here is that Nixon committed these crimes while in office. Trump is being accused of crimes and he was no longer president. But there actually is a precedent for that as well. In 1807, now this is very early in the Republic. This is like, 15 years after the start of the country. The former vice president, Aaron Burr, was actually tried, though he was acquitted of treason. Burr was accused of conspiring to seize Texas and West Florida, which at the time were colonies of Spain, and then combine them with some of the U.S. Western territories from Louisiana Purchase into a new country governed by him. Now, Thomas Jefferson, who Burr fought over the presidency in 1800, was a longtime foe of Burr, and Jefferson ordered that Burr be arrested and tried. Now, Burr escaped the news when Supreme Court Justice John Marshall, who presided at the trial, argued that conspiracy to commit treason did not constitute treason. So on that technicality, Burr hadn't broken the law.
Conspiracy to commit treason isn't treason. That's how Marshall got Burr off.
Yes, that's
Oh, that's crazy. That is totally crazy. Today, conspiracy to commit treason will get you put in jail.
So those are the two big cases of one, a president who was going to be put on trial until he was pardoned by his successor, and then a former vice president who almost became president, who was accused of treason and probably did commit treason, but that was after he left office. And then we have the Civil War cases, which are also important to look at, because what happens is after Abraham Lincoln is assassinated, Andrew Johnson becomes president, and Johnson issues pardons for almost all the Confederates, but not the top leadership, not Robert E. Lee, and not Jefferson Davis.
Or the vice president, Stevens. Yeah. Right,
well, right. Jefferson Davis had been president, before he becomes president of the Confederacy, he had been the United States Senator from Mississippi, and earlier he had been Secretary of War. So we're talking about a top U.S. official who goes to war against the country in treason.
Yeah.
Now, okay. Well, what happens is the Justice Department, just as the trial is ready to start, declares that it's not going to prosecute him. Once the Justice Department decides not to prosecute, same charges against Robert E. Lee are dropped.
Yeah.
Now, Lee was a colonel in the United States Army,
right,
who went to war against the country. Not only would Lee have faced criminal charges, but Lee should have faced a military court-martial.
Correct.
So clearly there has been precedence.
Yeah, the precedent is they keep letting these people off. They keep letting them escape going to trial to pay, or at least have a jury of their peers judge them on the crimes they committed. And so the problem with this country is, just like Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, just like a special prosecutor did not bring charges against Ronald Reagan for the Iran-Contra stuff because he said, I couldn't quite connect the dots to prove that he actually was complicit in doing this. So therefore, we won't go down that road because he is the president of the United States. All these people keep getting let off the hook. And just as, who was it? I think Heather Cox Richardson in one of her columns talked about the fact that the precedent of letting these people off does not bring the country any healing. It just emboldens them to do more and worse crimes, just like Donald Trump has been emboldened to continue to do the crazy stuff that he's doing.
And just for the sake of the young people, Richard Nixon's initial vice president was a person named Spiro Agnew. Now, he had to resign for a completely other reason. So Nixon had to select a new vice president, and he selected Gerald Ford. And of course, when Nixon resigned, Gerald Ford became president, our only unelected president in history. So he had hooks. He had, didn't have to worry about anybody. But as a teenager, I still believed in this country. But the day that Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon was the day I realized, holy cow, we got snookered. We got beat. They put one over on us because Nixon was all of a sudden absolved of everything. And Alan, I didn't know that the papers were still in the National Archives, that the charges that might have been brought, because, we can only imagine what that trial would have been. But I felt like somebody had robbed me that day.
They did. And that Justice Department memo about not indicting a sitting president, the only reason why they came down with that was because at the time they were getting ready to do that to Richard Nixon. This is before Watergate. Spiro Agnew was the vice president, and they already knew they had criminal charges on him. And so they said, well, we can't take care of Nixon because this crook is going to end up being president. And so it was, oh, well, we won't indict a sitting president. That's the Justice Department, quote, ruling. That's not anything written in any constitutional law. That's just precedent. And that precedent was set because they had a crook in the vice president's chair. And so they didn't want to go after the president and let the crook become president.
Yeah, Agnew was brought up on charges that he for crimes he committed while he was the governor of Maryland.
But he was still a crook being brought up on charges. Yes. That was it. The problem is, and it always seems to be some Republican crook that doesn't get brought to justice because everybody's saying we can't take the country through all that turmoil. We need to let these people go and heal the country. Well, look how we heal the country. We get a January 6th insurrection. We get people vomiting fake electors that basically were trying to overthrow a duly elected government. But talk to us, Alan, Bob, whichever you guys, about the fact that this country seems to be the only democratically, quote, semi-democratically run government that can't seem to bring its elected officials to justice. 200 plus heads of state in the 20th century have been brought to justice by, including in France, Sarkozy, Chirac,
Scotland, just right now.
Right now, there's a whole slew of politicians in democratically run countries that have been brought to justice by their governments because of corruption, of election shenanigans, all kinds of law-breaking stuff, and their democracy did not fall apart. So why is it this country and these Republicans that, let me set the record straight. Mitt Romney came out and said, this is horrendous. The charges brought by this indictment is really unconscionable. And he came right out and said, this needs to be handled through the law. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is the only Republican elected official that's sitting in our national legislature. He's a senator who actually said this man needs to be tried for his crimes. You know of anyone else in that party that said it. I haven't seen anything. Liz Cheney may have, but I haven't seen anything from her.
I mean, Mitt Romney, like I said multiple times on the show, like every 2 years he says something worth listening to. And he's pretty much untouchable because he was the party standard for the he obviously he lost to Obama.
It's a few years before he needs re-election, so yeah, he's safe.
Yeah, so he's in no danger of anything. He's pretty much untouchable, and he can actually say what he wants, unlike some, but there are others who can say what they want, but they don't have the backbone. But Mitt's okay. He's not going to be primaried out of his spot. But no, the Republicans have had every opportunity to do what other countries have done and turn their backs on officials, on leaders that mess up. But Republicans still embrace this guy, and that's what's killing us.
Well, not only that, they're following the Trump strategy, and the Trump strategy is to deny an attack, and that's what worries me. The argument against bringing Trump on charges, the argument that was made about Nixon and all the others, is that to bring them up, we need to have the nation heal. We need to come together. We need to put this behind us. The problem with that is when they let the civil Confederate generals go, instead of putting the problem behind us, we got 100 years of Jim Crow. The problem with Trump is that Trump is not interested in healing. Trump is interested in destroying. So if they, one way or the other, whether they bring him on trial or not, Trump will tear down democracy in the United States because it's all about aggrandizing himself. So that's what's really very scary. Letting him go is not going to heal anything. He's just going to continue on what he's done before.
You're correct, Alan. There's a very interesting opinion piece that a guy by the name of Eric Wierson, W-I-E-R-S-O-N, wrote for CNN. It's a CNN opinion piece. And I'll lift one quote from his article. He says, prosecuting a former leader for wrongdoing isn't a cog in the gears of democracy. It's a feature that keeps in check future leaders and reassures a nation that no one person, no matter his or her rank and influence, is above the law nor immunized from accountability. And that was an extremely well-written piece that dealt with why democracies can and should prosecute leaders who break their laws, because no man is above the law. And that's what Jack Smith, our special prosecutor, had to say when he brought in this indictment.
Now, I do have one other concern, and that is, I agree, you're correct, Eric, 100%, that other countries have held people account and they've put former leaders in jail for corruption. But I look at both Brazil and I look at Peru in Latin America. And what has happened in both of those countries is winning candidates have arrested losing candidates. And one of the things that's so weird in Brazil is Lula, I think his name is.
Lula. Mm-hmm.
Lula was president. Mm-hmm. So he was defeated. He was then arrested. While in jail, he ran for president again. He defeated Bolsonaro.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Bolsonaro. And now they're looking to put Bolsonaro in jail. So yeah. I don't know if those are kind of precedents I would like to see in the United States.
So here's my what I say, Alan, because I'm looking at it as a journalist, political editor, but the bottom line is, as a journalist, my tale is this: were they really corrupt? Did they deserve to be prosecuted? Or is this a selective prosecution that's like being charged by the Republicans about Trump? And the jury is semi out on Lula's case, but I'm saying the general population thought that Lula was railroaded when they sent him to jail. Yeah. And that's why when he got out, he was able to run for president and get reelected again, because they knew it was probably a trumped up charge. Now, the question is, did Bolsonaro actually not violate laws? Did he not try to strip the Amazon? Did he disregard all their goddamn laws about protecting the indigenous people's land? Or did he just run roughshod over those people? Did he commit or not commit certain crimes? I think just like Lula got charged, went to trial, I think Bolsonaro needs to get charged and go to trial. He either gets acquitted, just like Aaron Burr got acquitted, or he doesn't get acquitted. The bottom line is, you commit the crime, whether you're worried about, oh, well, this might be selective prosecution, let the chips fall where they may. Is it real crime? Does the evidence stack up? And if so, put him on trial, put her on trial, let the jury decide. And the democracy should not fall apart.
And with that, we have about a minute and a half left.
Oh, wow. I guess we won't talk about all those other stories we're going to
Yes, this has been a great discussion, but only because it's so darn full of stuff. But go ahead.
We talk about this because the fact that the Republicans are trying to claim that the Justice Department has been weaponized. Donald Trump weaponized the Justice Department under Barr. We had ultimate proof that Trump weaponized the Justice Department under Barr. We know that. The fact that they went after certain FBI agents, fired them before they got their pension, the day before and those guys have come back and won legal lawsuits because they were unjustly fired. We know that was weaponization of the Justice Department under Trump. But that's like, in psychology, they say you accuse people of what you really know you're guilty of yourself. That's Trump and his people. Accusing Merrick Garland of a weaponization of the Justice Department at Joe Biden's behest, and it's a crock of BS. Anyway, we're about out of time.
Just about, yes.
Okay, this has been Media Watch, folks. I am your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm guest and friend Alan Singer. Thank you for having me. This was really interesting today.
Thanks,
Yes,
Dr.
it was.
Greatly appreciate it. Guys, this is always fun. Let's hope it was enlightening for some of our viewers. And folks, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you the next time. Stay safe. Media Watch EVT, that's our YouTube handle.
Yes, it is. Okay. We'll be there.